everybody. This is criminal defense attorney Melissa Lefkowitz.
And this is relationship and trauma recovery coach Dorit Reichenthal.
And tonight we are revisiting the stories that are happening in Iran. It has been 11 weeks since the death of Mahsa Amini, who inspired months of protests that erupted in Iran's against mortality police and their mass imprisonment of political opponents and extrajudicial killings.
Since covering this subject just after Amini's death and a protest Melissa attended right here in L.A., you, our listeners, asked for an update from our guests. Team Justice for Iran, Dr. Payam Cade and attorney Sharen Ghatan.
So, back by popular demand are our esteemed, extraordinary guests, and they are joined tonight by a new voice of justice, former UN consultant and Columbia University educated psychotherapist, Dushanti Sachi. How did I do? Dushanti Sachi.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back, Team Justice for Iran.
Thank you for having us back.
Now,
Always
since you were last here, sorry, I just cut you off. No, it is. It's a happy time to have you here. Since you were last here in studio, the protests in Iran have gained incredible momentum and have spread all over the world. Tell us what's happened since you were last here.
Well, I can start. I definitely think it's time for us to move forward from calling it a protest and actually call it what it is, which is a revolution. It's no longer a protest.
You're right.
That's true.
It's been going on for quite some time, and it's going to still take many more months in order to accomplish the ultimate goal. But it's going, and it's now international, and they have a slogan, Zan Zendegi Azadi, which means woman, life, freedom.
Ooh, say that again. That was beautiful.
Zan Zendegi Azadi. And if you go anywhere in Westwood, you'll actually see signs and billboards all over.
That's right.
Where usually the personal injury attorneys are there. Now it says women, life, freedom. And it's a topic
where it used to have for personal injury lawyers. That was great.
I'm serious. That's where it is.
That was great.
It's talked about. There are events, fundraisers. People are talking about it at personal homes, at social events. And again, still federal building. I've gone to a few after I went to the event we went to on Melrose where we met
the rally.
Miss Sachi, remember the
where
rally?
We picked up Miss Sachi off the street.
Did.
Literally picked her up off the street. We're like, hey, you want to come on the radio?
There's been a lot of that going.
Love the bag, love the shoes, love the hair, love it. Come on.
We knew you'd be a perfect fit.
They were very fiery and spirited women, and like attracts like, right?
Two very good words to describe us.
Absolutely.
But listen, while this is finally being heard at an international level, just this Thursday, the state sanctioned a horrifying execution of basically a very young man, okay? Mohsen Shakari. Tell us about Mohsen.
Dr. Cade, do you want to take this?
I can just say right before that actually took place, very recently, the Iran's Attorney General basically spoke of abolishing the morality police and maybe reforming the hijab laws. I think that was obviously, as everybody knows now, it was a complete lie. They just wanted to gauge the public's sort of psyche to see if they can quiet them down. And obviously they came back later on and said that is not true, that is not going to take place because all of the orders come from above, from Khamenei himself. So after that, apparently this gentleman that you just referred to, he was supposedly blocking the street.
That's right.
That was his crime.
He was part of the quote actual protest.
That's right. So what they did is they obviously arrested him, and apparently he was arrested somewhere around 60 days ago.
Yeah.
His trial was no longer than 17 days.
With no lawyer, by the way.
With no lawyer present. And
so no due process whatsoever.
That's right.
Nothing.
And they basically said that he was cursing God, or he was against God's whatever rule that was.
And
so
he's
they decided
not the
to execute
only
him.
one, right?
No.
Dorit, you were about to raise somebody else who's sitting in jail for blasphemy and who's quite literally approaching the possible death penalty.
Right.
Yes.
No, that's true. So,
Masa Mohammadi.
Masa Mohammadi,
yeah,
she's a microbiologist.
right, she's
student.
a microbiology student, and she's facing the death penalty. And she was arrested and imprisoned 50 days ago by security forces in Iran for blasphemy.
Out of control.
They said he was cursing the prophet.
Right.
That's
I
what
can
they
add
said.
the latest that just happened. So right now here in LA, it's Sunday night, but in Iran, it's already Monday. And I have late international news to report. Majid Reza Rahnavard, another young gentleman, this morning was killed. He was executed and hung in the city of Mashhad. He had no attorney. He came to court with bruises, and he was completely tortured, and they made him, quote unquote, confess, and they hung him right there in the city square.
Oh, my
So this is the
God.
second person that we know, and this is literally happening right now.
And that's exactly what happened to Mohsen Shakari, too, right?
That's right.
He was hung
He
on
was number one.
Thursday. He was number one. And how
Well,
many?
as of yesterday, Dorit, I was looking up these numbers, and what I read was that at least 24 people were facing execution for their involvement in protests alone.
Absolutely.
And the frightening thing about this is it seems Iran has a long history of this sort of behavior in terms of protesters, anyone who goes against the government,
Absolutely.
getting arrested without due process. They are sentenced for things that are completely different from the reason they were brought in.
A few years ago,
That's
they
correct.
had what's called a green movement, and 1,500 people were killed then.
my God.
So to make sure that people shut up and go back to their homes. So for too long, I want to say 43 years actually, they have been imposing this tyranny of Islamic law, supposedly, to the destruction of the public and the country itself. And they're continuing to turn up the heat.
Yeah, and it seems like that's the fear after particularly what happened in 1988 with the massacre of the political prisoners then. And the numbers that I was reading, and it's really hard to tell, are anywhere from 3,000 to 30,000 people who were executed
Oh my
at one
God.
time, every 30 minutes, 6 people at a time.
Oh my God.
So the fear is that, we know that the government has a history of this mass execution specifically for people who are opposing the government. So now you have 15,000 people who we know are held, who are being tortured for opposing the government. And the big question in Iran and of the international community is what is going to happen to these protesters?
If you're
I think they're going to try to kill every single one of them.
Absolutely.
This
And
is
and
something
these are
that they've
kids.
done.
They're kids.
This is Gen Z. I'm glad you brought that up, Dorit. I did a little bit of research. The majority of these protesters and people that are involved are what's called Gen Z. They are age 15 to 25 years old. They want a democratic system. They have also wondered who will be coming into power. Would it be the king? Because as some of you may know, the Shah of Iran actually has a living son that lives in the United States. And so they want the king to come in, but they want him to take power and then create a referendum. But they definitely want a democratic system.
Unbelievable that this is going on. And the face of this is women
Young men.
who are, but the face of this movement, really, it's unbelievable, but it's become quite the feminist movement. We're going to get back with that after our commercial break. Let's be these voices for these people, everybody. Let's call for justice for them right after a quick commercial break. You're listening to Call for Justice only on 790 KABC. We are back with Call for Justice with Dorit Reichenthal and Melissa Lefkowitz. Before our break, we were discussing the worldwide protests that have erupted after a young woman's death in police custody and quickly grew into a call for justice to change the future of Iranian society. Now, with us tonight are our esteemed panel of guests, some of whom have real war stories to tell. I'd love to hear those stories. Both Sharen Ghatan and Dr. Payam Cade are both from Iran. They actually came from there and they have stories. Please share anything that you can with us.
I was about, I want to say 4 years old. I was born in Iran, and at the age of 4, there seemed to be some turmoil, and I guess that was the first revolution. Obviously, I was just a little kid, and I had not yet been enrolled in school, and I didn't know what these sounds were, but I knew that it was really frightening.
Wow.
Every night, I remember hiding under my bed and hearing bombs go off, not knowing what was happening and why, but I remember I was really, really scared. And my father was very well known. My father was the royal physician, and he happened to be Iranian and Jewish. And for that reason, we were in big trouble.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So-
I can only imagine the terror and trauma that you and your whole family experienced.
It was crazy. My mom told me we were going to go on a trip to the United States to visit family, and we could each carry one bag. We took one bag, my favorite doll, and my favorite book. One bag.
Wow.
My dad couldn't come with us because my mom said that he was going to come later. I later, as an adult, found out that if my dad had come with us, they would have stopped us. We had to pretend we were just taking a quick holiday. So we got on Air France at the time, and then TWA, and my mom still has the actual tickets. And with one bag. And we came over here. My dad, 2 years later, came with my grandfather, and he had gone to Columbia University and was schooled in the U.S. and was, again, very esteemed. And he said he was going to bring back the latest medications so that the manufacturers and the pharmacies and the companies in Iran could make them. That was the guise that he left Iran under. 2 years.
Wow.
2 years. And that's how we came here.
Did you have siblings?
No siblings then. It was just me. I was an only child. And the good thing was my dad had spoken exclusively English to me, and my mom had spoken exclusively Farsi. I had never studied Farsi. I never went to school. I even went to preschool here in the United States. Grew up in Marin County, so I had no accent. They gave me an American name. My name was really, it's really Sharon. It's not short or a nickname. So I was able to acclimate because I didn't have an accent. And my mom is very fair, like you guys, Melissa and Dorit. So they couldn't really tell what nationality we were. They thought I had a weird last name, but I was Sharon.
Right.
So we fit in until my dad came. And my dad, started from scratch.
Sure.
And, created this beautiful life for us. And then my brother was born in the U.S. And we like to say, Sean can become president of the United States, but poor me. I guess I can become a senator, but that's the best. Maybe a governor, but that's it.
You know what? We're rooting for you, Sharon.
But just for the record, you could become president, and the world might be a better place for it.
Absolutely.
I've been thinking a lot about the Iranian community here and globally, and how difficult this must be to watch because of all the memories that probably come up. There's, with the trauma that you're watching online and all over social media. I'm sure it brings back a lot of emotional memory as well as the actual tangible memories.
I don't want to.
It's constant.
I don't want to. I hope the listeners don't think that I'm saying anything against Islam in any way. But I just want to share something, if there is a minute.
Please.
If you go back into history and you read about how Iran was actually attacked by in 633 AD, they called the Rashidun Caliphate. They attacked Iran, and over a 20-year period, they either killed people or beheaded them to make sure they surrendered to the movement of Islam. That was around the 7th century, and that's when the Sasanian dynasty was a government then fell, and they took over. I want to say that today we can actually experience the same thing happening in Iran right now. Clearly, they're following the same roadmap, in my opinion, and they're doing it to make sure that there is no uprising and there is no call for justice or freedom. The government that is in Iran right now absolutely does not care about human being and does not care about anything that happens to people. We know that all of the assets of Iran has probably been either destroyed or they have taken it out of the country under their own names in Canada and a lot of other countries. And unfortunately, the poor people are basically not just fighting or screaming for hijab reform. They're asking for freedom. They're asking for all of their money. They're asking for everything that they don't have. And only quite a few people actually have taken it from them. And that's what's going on right now in Iran. And I think when I left Iran, the same thing was actually happening there too at that time, except nobody could talk about it.
What does that mean? Tell us what that means.
When I left, I remember when the revolution happened, I remember my mother collapsed in the kitchen. And I thought she's just faking it. Or I didn't know. I was only 9 years old, I think. And my mom cried and said, Iran is finished. When the Shah left Iran, she said, Iran is finished. I think she knew better than me, God rest her soul. At that time, when the war started, I think everybody covered their windows. We couldn't turn on lights at night. We had to just watch TV in a room that was, all the windows were covered with foil and papers and whatever. And that was, I don't know if it was really a painful experience for me, but certainly it was to my dad. He was a very good doctor, very well-known doctor. He lost his office and practice in south of Iran because it was bombed. He moved everything to the north, and we came to Tehran, and we lived there for a while. And of course, because he could still do his business in Tehran, we were doing fine. So I'm not going to say we were under any pressure or whatever. But then we left Iran, and I want to really thank every single person who was actually there to support us, including Hayas, who took us to Switzerland, and from there to Austria. We were there for 6 months, and they really handed us our green card before we entered the United States. Wow. It was like that wonderful. But I'm feeling the pain of the people that are in Iran, and they have no voice and no choice.
No voice and no choice.
Always with the one-liners, Doc. I love it.
And they're good
true.
ones.
So good.
They're good ones.
Well, it's so interesting because this is all done under the guise of morality. And I say the guise of morality and under the guise of God, because
God doesn't want any part of this.
I was going to say the tyranny and the brutality that is being perpetrated on this Gen Z.
They should change the name of that morality police, at least to remove the morality.
Yeah, because they should be immorality
they
police.
Do nothing moral.
There is nothing moral about rape and torture.
And
rape, torture,
and most
the new
recently,
one,
the new one that Sharen brought to my attention. Let's speak.
They're blinding the beautiful girls.
Oh my God.
Blinding them.
And I read up on it.
God.
They're not just blinding them. They're attacking their faces, their eyes, right?
Acid as well.
But guess what? They're also attacking their genitals.
They're shooting.
Yes.
By the way, we talked about it last time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but we talked about it last time. If the girls are arrested and they're going to be killed or hanged, they are going to rape them and then kill them, or kill them because
they can't die a virgin.
Because supposedly in Islamic law you cannot die a virgin, so you have to be. You cannot be a virgin.
And these laws and these religious and political. So we know the Islamic Republic is a theocratic state, right, where the religion and the government are combined. It's a very specific interpretation of Islam, right? It's not the interpretation that a lot of people have. The same thing when there's wars fought for Christianity or Buddhism, where it's sort of a interpretation that justifies violence, that a lot of people actually practicing these religions don't practice. Correct?
They have actually
Absolutely
created their own laws. These are not, if you read Quran, I have read it. I actually took the class, even though I'm not Muslim. I don't even personally, I don't even think I really have a serious religion. I'm just being honest about it. I think if you're a good human being, that's the best religion you can have. And
I like that religion.
But I can definitely say when I read that, nowhere in Quran you're going to see any of this stuff that these people are talking about. They're making their own rules and their own laws.
Absolutely. And as you said, it has nothing to do with God, actually.
None.
There's a much different motivation.
Nothing. I was just going to chime in right here. You're speaking about God. We also talk about a Hippocratic oath. Did you know they are now putting doctors who treat the protesters, who try to help the protesters, who try to, let's say,
mend their faces,
put together their faces, their eyes,
or their genitals,
anything. There's a Dr. Hamid Karahassanlu. I'm probably butchering his name. I apologize. He is a doctor who's been tortured during interrogation. He and his wife are great philanthropists. And again, he says, I swore to take, an oath, and I did, and I want to help everyone. They're going to kill him too.
Wow.
They're literally going to kill everyone and anyone that's good, from your biology student to the rappers to the kids in the street.
That beautiful song that we heard, do we know what happened with the author of that song? His name was Shervin Hajipur.
He was apparently imprisoned and then he was released on bail. And I think he's under house arrest.
Yeah, we don't know what's happened
anything
to him.
else. We know anything else about him.
And we don't know if he knows
Unbelievable.
that he's up for all these awards, and how this song, I actually saw on Instagram the other day, a group of French school children singing the song. They don't even speak Farsi, but they're singing the
Isn't
song.
the song so
amazing.
beautiful?
It's so touching.
Hey, wait a minute. Can we please play this fabulous song for our audience, for our listeners? We played this to our listeners last time we did this show, and it was so beautiful, so touching. And if we could also translate it as we go, that would be so amazing.
We'll do that. Half
Here
and
we
half.
go.
If we can.
And again, remember, everyone, these are a series of tweets put together. to
Yeah,
make
and
us-
let's talk over this, but, let's explain what this is.
for fear of kissing, for my sister, your sister, all of our sisters, for the corrupt minds, for the embarrassment, for poverty, for feeling sorry and just wanting a normal life, for hopes and dreams, for this horrible financial situation,
You're a good translator.
for the polluted air, for the trees that are going extinct, for yesterday, for the dogs. You can't have dogs. They kill dogs.
Forbidden. You cannot have dogs.
Unbelievable.
So beautiful.
For that one moment that you can smile. For all the students. For the future.
Yes.
For this forced heaven. For everyone in jail. For the Afghani children. For all the becauses I can't repeat. For all the empty promises. For all the empty houses. For the lack of having peace of mind. For taking all these pills because our minds are blowing up. For a girl who wants to be a boy.
Wow.
For a woman, life, freedom.
Freedom.
Wow.
Women, life,
Freedom.
freedom. Woman, life, freedom.
And even if you don't understand the words, even the rhythm is just so...
Oh, it gave
That
me the
melody
haunting,
touches-
right? All right, we have to
it
take
touches the
our
heart.
second commercial break, but when we get back, we'll talk more about this song. We'll talk more about how it made us feel.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Call for Justice, 790 KABC. Keep listening. We are back with Call for Justice. Now, before our break, we were discussing the revolution that's erupted in Iran since Mahsa Amini's death. With us tonight are our esteemed panel of guests, some of whom have just been through it, told us all about it. Now, Dushanti Sachi, you posted an incredibly moving video on Instagram that quite literally inspired me to reach out to you to come on this show. Now, can you reiterate what you said on that video? Because I think it's very important for all of us to hear how this has been really called a feminist movement and why, right? And what is it that's really opened this whole thing up, that women are the face of this?
Right. I think what really struck me as someone who's worked in this gender-based violence against women for a long time was the reaction to this one specific death. Because we know at the UN they've documented that there are 5,000 what we call honor killings a year around the world. So those are
Unreal.
Those are women who have been killed for being dishonorable, and in this case, it was showing the hair.
Oh my God.
So what was it specifically about this one that sparked such global outrage? Was it the pictures? Because in Iran, from what I've heard, women have been protesting for a long time, and there have been these sorts of occurrences happening for a long time. So whether it was the picture, this somehow awakened the international community to say, hey, what is happening in Iran? What's happening? And we've all sort of learned a lot more through social media, through all these conversations. And I think what's very specific about Iran is you have not only this physical violence to women, but you also have a legal system with the morality police and the judiciary that on the books is saying this is okay to do. And in fact, we have a group of people who are going to make sure
sanctioned.
Yes,
everybody.
it's sanctioned.
This is not illegal conduct.
Yes, and
not here, but there. Right?
Women just don't have equal rights to men at all.
Yeah.
Period.
So, and this is exactly, people are like, well, how is this grown? Because if you look at it as gender-based violence, and this is an honor killing, and then how are women treated in this society? And you come to this whole list of what women can and cannot do, right? And a lot of the cannots, right? Whether it's the choice to be single, to wear what you want, the kind of occupation, to kiss, as the song so eloquently to sing, to dance,
to leave the country without permission.
And this is how it's grown through. So this is a feminist movement that has been started by women in Iran and then supported by the community. So you have the physical violence. You have the legal system there that is also enforcing and encouraging that violence. And then on the third level there, you have the ideological, the social impacts there because of this interpretation of the law that women can somehow bring shame to society by all of these actions, by dancing, by singing, that they can shame the men. And I was reading that the morality police release the women to the men. You know, it's this very much this sense of ownership.
Like how you would release a dog if the owner comes and finds it at the pound.
Wow.
Yeah. So these concepts as feminists, you know, we know about, we know what these are. And these are things that if you are a feminist, we cannot see this and not call this as injustice and push back and want to see those women liberated.
Absolutely.
How can I know this now and not care and not want to see their liberation and stand alongside them? This is true for feminism globally. And
it's a humanitarian issue.
It's a humanitarian issue.
And the other part of it is, these are highly educated women.
Yes.
I mean, so on the one hand, women in Iran are raised to be highly educated, independent thinkers. And then on the other side,
you can't be a judge. You can't do what you need to do, right? That's the other side.
That's the other part of it. And God forbid you should have your hair showing, or God forbid you should show any joy, happiness, singing, dancing, and that becomes punishable by death.
So people ask me,
I think there's one more ironic part just to touch on what you said. They are smart enough to know what they are missing out on. They are educated enough to know.
Of course.
That hurts even
that this
more.
world is so different that in the U.S., Melissa and I can be attorneys, and in Iran, Melissa and I would have no place in society. We couldn't be attorneys. We couldn't have attorneys.
Unbelievable.
Well, and here are all these people that are executed without attorneys.
So people have asked me, what is your connection to this? You're not Iranian. Why do you post about it? Why do you care about it?
Yeah, why?
Wow.
And how can I not is
How
my answer.
can you not?
This is the largest feminist movement I have seen in my entire lifetime. Have we ever seen anything like this?
Never.
No.
And how could
No,
you
it's
not?
spread all over the world. I mean, Germany just had another protest just last night.
How could you not join if you call yourself a feminist, which now in America, not when I started in feminism, now it's a very trendy thing to say I'm a feminist. You see it on girls' social media.
Hashtag feminist.
Well, let me
Sweatshirts.
see it.
It's
let
everywhere.
Me see it. Let me see you stand up for the vulnerable and the oppressed.
The irony
Like you
is you
said-
don't see it. I think you're very brave to stand up.
Like-
And you said that people asked you why do you, what's you don't have a dog in this fight.
Right.
There's a lot of high profile public figures that aren't speaking about it.
Like you just mentioned, I think Melissa just touched on it. I think the fundamental difference between a human being and animal, of course, and I'm not putting down any animals, but the fundamental difference between us and animals is that we have the capacity to do reasoning and logical thinking.
There it is.
These people have the ability to think for themselves logically. They know this is wrong and it's not supposed to happen to them. We know it's not supposed to happen to them. And that government and that regime is taking that capability away from them and punishing them for the ability to think and ask to be heard, have a choice, have a voice. You have nothing. And I keep repeating that. But that when that capability is taken away from you, then you feel like I'm not a human being. Because everywhere else in the world, people have a choice and they have a voice and they can talk and say what is it that they want. If they want to sing, they want to kiss, they want to dance, they want to leave the country, they want to get married, not get married, they can make that choice.
And
they cannot.
And dehumanization is a good word. And that's the word that comes up in psychology, in the psychology of genocide and mass atrocity.
Exactly.
Because this really got studied after World War II.
Absolutely.
Because, so you know about this story. As a drama therapist, so, people were like, how could this happen? Are these crazy people that are doing this? And what is the psychology around this? And they came up with a couple concepts, but one of those was dehumanization, where you really have to see the other as not a human being in order to go along with this. And the other was group think. And when people get into a group, so if you think like a frat house where you hear of these wild things happening, your thinking can become more extreme.
We're very familiar with those whole group theories as lawyers. We hear that.
Right.
Okay, but the fact is, as Holocaust survivor's granddaughter, I will say this, nothing is more dehumanizing than reducing somebody to a number, like the story was in the Holocaust, or reducing somebody to be incapacitated to think and do for themselves, which is what's happening in Iran right now, right?
And when you see a human being, as the Nazis did, as vermin, and you refer to a group of people like the Nazis referred to Jews as vermin, that's the dehumanization. And when you do not see a woman, a girl, a child, we're all children of God. And if you don't see them as human and you see them as a possession,
dispensable possessions,
absolutely,
who could be hung for protesting. I mean, let's really break this down. For flying a drone,
they have somebody on death row for flying a drone.
For handing out chocolates.
What?
Oh my.
Did you see that one?
No, I didn't see that
one. Yes, there was one for handing chocolates. Yes.
Speaking of chocolates, I do have cookies here. And anybody want some?
There was a guy who was handing out chocolates on the street for people who were protesting and not wearing the hijab, and he has been sentenced for execution. So
there was a
execution for handing out chocolate.
Let me tell you, I have that's beyond. I have a girl whose name is, I researched her. Her name is Armida Abbasi. And anyone who's Persian will know Abbasi is like a very common Muslim name. So she's Muslim. She's 20 years old. But because she sees what's going on over there, there's a faction of Iranian Jews as well over there, by the way. She puts on a Star of David. The girl's not Jewish, okay? She puts it on. They arrest her and rape her for putting on the Star of David necklace. Yes.
No.
Armida Abbasi. Go and find out what happened to her. She's missing.
Oh, goodness.
I hope that anyone that can send a message to this morality or immorality police, of course, my accent just came up, they can actually tell these people that the choice that you're making right now, it's going actually against God.
It's
immoral.
Against
anything that God or anyone else can stand for. So please put your weapons down and stop killing people. Maybe you should find another profession, do something else for a living, but stop killing people. And the other thing that I wanted to share, I'm sorry, just one last second.
And can you talk about, I really liked what Deshanti said. I've always wanted to know what's in the mind of the people that are following the orders.
This is in my.
We're gonna have to get back to that because we're about to go out to commercial break. But finish your thought very quickly.
I was just going to say, if your thought that this is okay, and you're empowered by the people that you're surrounded with, and they give you that philosophy, it becomes part of your nature, and you think this is okay to do.
Wow.
And people continue to do that if they're not stopped and regime is not changed.
Desensitization to violence.
Exactly.
And the bystander effect, too, where you don't feel it's your responsibility to speak up. That's also
Beyond that, though, you cannot have a conscience. You cannot have empathy.
You cannot have a sister or a mother. How about that?
You
For all
can
the
have a
girls and
sister
women
or
that
a
are
mother
leave with that.
because the
Let's-
honor killings are done to your daughters, your sisters, and your mothers.
I don't understand it.
Right. So there's no conscience, no empathy. People hear me talk about psychopathy all the time. You can have a morality police where there's no conscience, no empathy in order to perpetrate these acts.
I mean, that's a bit contrary to the psychology, but I can hear where you're going with that. And I think what they do find are the people who do stand up have higher levels of empathy. They tend to have mothers who had a higher empathetic teaching. They have families that come from a different code of morality about helping others. So in the studies, scientifically, you do see that link with empathy and the people who actually stand up and help. They call them the rescuers, but I don't really like that
Or
word.
I don't like it, but they're what in my world we call them super traits. Hyper empathy
Yeah.
and hyper compassion.
Yeah.
Those are super traits, and they have to stand up for what they believe in. They are people
They're
that
more
are
independent. They go against the grain. So they have these different classifications.
exactly.
Yeah, but they don't always, in my reading, and maybe you've read differently, link a lack of empathy, ironically, with the people who are committing these or any sort of mental illness. It's more of like in the studies, and the studies can be wrong, but an indoctrination and like a brainwashing and sort of a that sort of thing, like what you see in frat houses when you see these sort of normal teenage boys and all of a sudden somebody died, right?
Wow.
You've seen that happen. So
This is fascinating.
So
When we
so
get back from commercial break, I want to address Sharon's question to Dr. Payam Cade because I thought that was also extremely fascinating. You are listening to Call for Justice right here on 790 KABC, and we're going out to our final commercial. We are back with Call for Justice. With us tonight are an esteemed panel of guests, some of whom have been through the ringer themselves in Iran. They are here tonight to tell us everything that's happening. They were on our show prior. They absolutely stunned our listeners. Our listeners wanted you back. That's the bottom line. They wrote in, they called, they begged, they said, we want more justice for Iran. And so you are here. We also have a fabulous new voice of justice with us here tonight. And we are learning so much. Dorit, is this not incredible?
It sure is. We are so thrilled to have you.
It's
all of you.
unbelievable.
Thank you.
We're pleased to be here.
Now, Dorit, you wanted to come in with the question of how has the Iranian government responded to all of this?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, I can pick up.
We're talking protest after protest. Just
Yes.
for those of you just joining us, we're talking about straight up a revolution. It's protest after protest. It's truly spread all over the country, all over the world. Just yesterday in Germany, I mean, we are protesting everywhere. Sharon and I went to a protest where we literally picked up Dushanti, and she became our new buddy. Like we were like, yo, hey. So now, she's here tonight. Look at how this was so unifying, by the way. I want to point that out.
It sure
But
is.
anyway, that being said, let's get back to it. How has the government responded?
The government is responding with great force. And that's why you're now hearing about the executions. Because before they just put people in prison, it was indefinite. They were raping them, maiming them, hurting them, blinding them. But now they're just going to kill them because there's nothing left after
do
killing.
Exactly.
After they
they've
do
done
all of the above.
that, right.
Of course.
So, Dushanti, is there anything that we can do to stop these executions?
Well, when you look at what happened in 1988, which was the massacre of all of those political prisoners in the thousands and how swiftly it happened, I do wonder if the more that we increase the spotlight, the international spotlight on this, that it will give them pause. I wonder if there hadn't been this sort of conversation around it, would they have killed everybody faster? And the United Nations had the meeting where they said, we are going to do an investigation. And Iran's response, which I haven't seen publicized a lot, but Iran's response was, we're not going to comply, which is typically what happens at the UN. They're saying, Germany started this request, and Germany's responsible for the chemical bombs that happened in the Iraq-Iran war. So we don't care what Germany has to say. So we're not a part of it. But the documentation has started either way of the atrocities. So when we know historically, whether it's in Darfur, whether it's apartheid in South Africa, when there are eyes on these governments, it does slow the execution, but there's got to be a lot of eyes, a lot of voices, and Congress and international governments have to respond with the
I
sanctions.
like the way you think. I like what you're throwing down, but I'm going to be honest, and I hate to be, keeping it real here. Let's think about what's happened over the past couple of months since Mahsa Amini's death. The world is on notice, okay? It's all over Twitter. It's all over social media. It's all over the news now, regular streaming, normal media outlets. It doesn't seem to matter.
Well,
that's what's scaring the living daylights out of me, because it's vaguely reminiscent to me.
I just wanted to share that I think maybe somebody else knows better than me, but I think December 14 is when United Nations is going to vote to either keep Iran or remove Iran from the Women's Equality and Empowerment Body, which
is almost funny.
Which I think Iran should have no place.
Are they even on the body?
Any body that actually talks about women, talks about equality or empowerment, because the people that are running the government of Iran, including the morality police that are doing all this crazy stuff, these are people that are just followers of an ideology that has created by sick people, that was created by sick people, seriously sick people, they're sick-minded people. And I don't think anyone in that government is going to stop unless the political pressure and sanctions go much higher than what it is now. They will not stop. These are not educated people. Mark Twain said something wonderful. He said, the man who does not read, and these people we know they haven't read anything, has no advantage over a man who cannot read. These people, the morality police that we are talking about, they have given a book. This is what you're supposed to go out there and do, and they're doing it. They're not educated. They don't know any better. They don't have a heart. They have no soul, and all they have to do is to follow and get paid for it.
It's the Nuremberg defense.
And the regime is fighting for their survival.
Absolutely. They know they don't have anywhere to go. If they're kicked out of Iran, they're probably going to be imprisoned and then maybe go on trial for all these massacres that they're doing, and they're going to be killed. So they have to just fight to the last breath. That's it.
Absolutely.
Just what Hitler did. They're doing the same thing.
And we don't know what will work. And we can look globally and say what's worked in other countries, right? And it's been this amplification combined with international pressure, Congress pressure. That's the only thing we've seen that's worked a little bit, as well as uprisings internally in the country, right? So that's all we can do.
I agree with you, and I think it's going to be a long path. But I do know I do have some good news, dare I say.
Please. Yeah, we want to hear it.
We'd like to end off on some good news.
Internationally, all of the craziness and madness that's going on with Iran, because Iran is so busy fighting a civil war inside its own country, Iran doesn't have the money, the time, or the means to support Palestinian terror groups and Hamas. So Palestinian terror groups and Hamas are damn mad because they're not getting the regular support.
Wait, how do they have the means to be slaughtering people?
No, I'm saying
I'm just
the
curious
money
how
that they sent out to.
I know, but that's got to cost something, right?
Yes, but they have a lot. They have a lot of money that's stolen from all of the, the Iranians, the natives.
Right.
So all that money they use to fund terrorism, literally.
Beyond that.
So now these people aren't being funded.
So and
which
the
is
other
great.
The other interesting thing is that Iran is supplying the Russians with the drones to attack the Ukrainians.
That's true.
Well, and that's
Wow.
that's the thing to remember about these impoverished countries. They get a lot of aid globally, and the people who are wealthy there are phenomenally wealthy.
Yes.
It's just that there's no
Like
middle,
obscenely.
Like the
there's
top
just-
1%,
there's
literally.
just no middle class. There was starting to be a middle class before the revolution in
Absolutely.
'79.
Yeah.
And then it all toppled.
All right, so here's what I want to know before we close, because we only have a few more minutes, and I want to make sure to get out how we can reach you all, because you're so incredible, and we want our listeners to be able to reach out. So very quickly, we'll take it to a vote, and I'll just let you listeners know who voted what, okay? Could regime change happen, yes or no? Raise your hand.
100%.
Regime change,
Yes.
yes.
It will happen.
Okay, so almost everybody raised their hand except me here. Do it again. Let me just see.
all four of us.
Okay,
Yes.
all four of you
The
have
Velvet
raised your
Revolution
hands.
will be
okay?
successful.
Right.
I
no
am
doubt.
raising my hands against. I want it, obviously. Don't think I'm against it. I'm not, okay? But I'm realistic, and I see that there hasn't been much progress, and that they seem to be using an even harsher hand than ever before.
But
It's like,
that's the desperation, Melissa.
Before
Right.
things get better, they get
oh,
worse.
let's hope so.
course.
Okay. But before we go for the evening, you guys have been absolutely spectacular. I can't thank you enough for being here. And I also can't thank our listeners enough for demanding that we call for justice for Iran. This was a brilliant idea. And thank you, listeners, for really encouraging us to get these incredible individuals back in studio. They're so brilliant. They're so talented. And they are available to you if you want to talk. So, Dorit, how can we reach you?
Relationship Works Life Coaching, 310-721-2119.
That's Dorit Reichenthal, everybody. Now, Sharen Ghatan.
Good evening, everyone. Sharen Ghatan, California Legal Counsel. My toll-free number is 888-704-9777. Personal injury and criminal defense.
Amazing. And she's amazing. Dr. Payam Cade.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me.
Extraordinaire.
I just want to say I am so grateful for this opportunity. I hope that the listeners actually go out there and post something about this so everybody else become aware.
Where do we reach you?
dr.kade@yahoo.com.
Amazing. And Dushanti.
310-709-1102.
Amazing. And Dushanti, how do we reach you? And an email address?
Yeah,
Or
thank you also for having me, and to all of you for the conversation. I would say the best way is through my social media. That will keep you in the loop of what's going on. Maybe we can even post something that the listeners
will.
can share. But it's Dushanti, Dusyanthi. My last name's Sachi.